we go. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. How are we doing today?
Hey, John. Good. How about yourself?
Very good. Very good. Getting ready for Christmas.
Always.
Getting ready for Christmas. So I think it's going to be fairly quiet as everyone's now given up and ready for Christmas time, right? Christmas parties kicking in. And we only just really had the last update last week. But shall we kick off? Get my notes. Yep. Right. So if people can note their attendance, that would be great. I'm going to do that too. Dan, straight to the front with best note taking in the world. Appreciate that. Thank you. Very good.
Gotta keep my fingers warm in the climate, you know. So.
Excellent. Okay, so I think mainly familiar faces here, but if there's any new people joining, we can add them to the group. So let's get off with the agenda, if that's okay. Mitch, I know you and I talked a little bit, and it's still in progress, but do you want to give people a bit of an update on the work you're doing?
Yeah, hi, welcome everybody. Folks that I haven't met before, pardon my voice, I've been out between COVID and a cold. I'm a TechStrong Group media company. I'm the CTO that runs all the technology, and I'm both a developer and a security person. And so I talked to Jonathan about helping out wherever I can. And one of the things we decided to kind of take on is get some of our documentation about the main sort of README page on GitHub for the working group. So I'm pouring through the notes of past agendas and putting things like the mission and description that you all have already talked about, and kind of give us a good landing page on GitHub with the information that you've got, or maybe we fill in a few blanks. So I might reach out with a few questions here and there just to help get started. So I just offered to Jonathan, I'm happy to help in any way. And though I'm not an open source developer, my teams have contributed to a number of open source projects over the years. So looking for ways to get back and just help out with this. So software and security, it's a great interest of mine. So thank you for having me and letting me help you work on this.
No, it's very cool. Thank you very much, Mitch. And look, I think, you know, as those updates come in, just make them, and then perhaps if we can catch up asynchronously on the Slack channel, see if people want to provide updates. No need, I think, to stand on ceremony, particularly since we'll be out likely over Christmas. So I think we just add contributions to it and see how we go.
That'd be wonderful.
Very good. All right, thank you very much. So next on agenda, over to me for the proposals. So I had a chat as we've been going through this with Krobe. See you joining. Thank you for that. And Ava and also Bob Calloway. And caught up again with Bob over the last couple of days and confirmed that we are good to propose to the TAC. So he's going to put us on the agenda for January at this point, but it's going to be, I think, the first one in January. And that's going to be the two proposals, the taxonomy one and the end-to-end architecture one. I think everyone's reviewed it, put in additional comments. Different TAC members have put in additional comments. So I think we've got to feel pretty good in terms of where that's going to go. Kind of locked and loaded, really, just until we get the meeting in January. But I think that's a pretty positive outcome. That's kind of my update for that. Krobe, anything from you on that? Obviously, you're.
No, I'm happy this is proceeding. It's good work we're proposing here, and excited to see how the TAC embraces it.
Excellent. Looking good for that. But yeah, I think, I don't want to lead the witness, I guess. Certainly I've had a +1 from Krobe on that already, +1 from Bob. Yeah, I think we're in great shape. Right, next one is the end user group end of year statement. Andrew has just sent his apologies. He's at the Finos group at the moment. talking about open source, and I think he's probably going to drop a plug in for us as well. But Andrew did the end of year statement for the end user group with Jen. I'm not sure when that actually goes out. So it was Jennifer Bly. I do have a copy of it, but I think that's probably sort of an internal copy, I guess. I don't really know the ins and outs of that. Does anyone know when the end of year report gets finally published? No. All right, well, Andrew's done some great work there. It really just reviews our goals, which is part of the our remit, a number of regular contributors, some 2022 highlights in there, including the proposals we're making. So I think we're in, I think, a reasonable attempt in that end of year statement. So thumbs up for Andrew, I think, for that one. Right, it's going to be me doing all
anything that. Is there anything
Tim.
that we can link to? Is there any?
I can't,
sorry.
because the only thing I've got is Jen sent across like a copy to edit, and Andy was the only one that edited. I wonder if let me just ping a follow up to see when this comes out. I'll try and throw it onto the Slack when I find out when it's published. But I think every or a large number of working groups provided some feedback on what they were doing this year, and we're certainly in that group. So appropriately represented. Right. Next one is the supply chain total and malicious threat. So last week we had Zachi from Checkmarks also come and add his voice to that. I know, Jacques, you had some thoughts on that. I'd reached out to the securing software repo working group. Oh, I haven't had time to read my replies. So it sounds like there is interest in getting together as an ad hoc group to have a quick discussion about it. And Jacques, do you want to provide a bit of an update there? Just trying to read in real time your feedback.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to wonder what feedback I gave. Did I say a swear word? Who knows?
No, you did not. It was confluence of interests at TAC next week. TAC update.
Oh yes. So we the securing software repos group is up for reporting at TAC next week. One thing I want to mention during that report is, hey, we've noticed that multiple groups have had the same idea or an overlapping idea, and we want you to be aware of it. We're going to figure out amongst ourselves who does what and how it fits together, but you know, heads up, this is something that has popped up in a lot of places, and you know, any guidance or advice, most welcome.
Yep, I think that's great. And I think hopefully that'll be well received. Just looking at the list of replies for that message, I've had a thumbs up from yourself, Randall, yourself, Shaq, Marina Moore, Drew. So there's quite a couple of people who are interested in collaborating on that. And you know, I should probably put together a sort of brief meeting next week to see if we can get some sort of momentum behind it, as well as just your good self talking to the TAC, Shaq. Yep, great. I think you're right, though. I think there's a couple of other proposals like that where they're starting to be talked about in multiple working groups. And I think we just need to be aware that we don't replicate stuff all over the place and try and reach out to people. So this is pretty cool. Very good. All right, so I guess I'll take an action on the back of that feedback to set up a meeting next week and start the ball rolling a little bit faster. But I'm keen not to be the one leading that necessarily, because I think there's some great work happening in the multiple different working groups. It's just making sure that we're plugged into it. All right, the final thing for me is deliverables for next year. I wanted to sort of have a discussion as a working group. you know, where are we going to take things next year? We've got a couple of the deliverables on the charter. We're going through these different proposals, but is there anything specific that we as a group feel that's missing? We really want to push anything that we want to add to our deliverables, perhaps.
One thing
go for
I've
it,
seen done at the CNCF end users working group, and I'm sure it's elsewhere as well, is providing space for different end users to share their experiences with using a particular technology or, you know, output or product under the CNCF aegis. So I think we maybe not right away, but as we grow the group and as these technologies, documents, procedures, etc., mature, people will start road testing them. People will start applying them for realsies, and the end users group is a great place to share those experiences with each other. And also that lets us be a point of contact that then can bubble that up to other groups. When we have particular feedback, we can say, look at this meeting.
Yeah, that's a great call. You know, how that people are mitigating some of those issues, perhaps the threats that people see, different projects of interest. That sounds really good. Any other thoughts?
So, John, given the document on the architectures, right? I don't think that we have gotten to establish an architecture from a regulated consumer or end user yet.
That's kind of
as in
the large
hospital,
one,
right?
You-
No. I think in the architecture slides, we have the large as a development organization, but I guess as a consumer only architecture. We haven't gotten that nailed down yet. But what I was going to say is that we perhaps want to expand on the other functions aside of the pipelines, or as in, for example, vulnerability management and how these ones relate to the processes that we're trying to control in the pipelines.
So you mean for a regulated consumer, expand not just the pipeline, but also vulnerability management and other processes and tasks that someone would need to do in that regulated
Precisely.
environment, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm pretty excited to see that expand, right, with the work that Piaget and Henrique putting into those architectures. It'd be good to see those build out as well, right? Just across the other use cases. We do need to define as well. This is probably more short term than anything else. It wasn't just small, medium, and large. There were better names for it, I think, when we were talking about it before. Dan,
Maybe something SBOM, because something SBOM something. What I'm thinking of specifically is I saw a note somewhere about some company that was going through PCI compliance checklist, and their PCI and their whatever company auditor was they were working with seemed to be implying that part of PCI compliance is now also providing SBOM type information about and so yeah, exactly, that's what I said to Grub. And yeah, so I hadn't seen this before, but I think some investigation might be necessary, and especially this seems to be, to me, to be something that really would apply to end users, to consumers, right? Like if you're an e-commerce platform and you're making use you're gonna want to know what implications this has for you about the use of open source packages, that kind of thing. So maybe just something to bookmark that we should be looking at for next year.
Yep.
And as a coordination project with SBOM Everywhere workstream.
So one thing that I can add that might be useful is, right, the SBOM consumption tools have really lagged understandably, right? Because no one has piles and piles of SBOMs. And so I think one thing that this group could do is say, hey, what do we want in some SBOM tools? So that, right, folks who are building open source, or dare I say building proprietary products, could say, you know, okay, this is what a large group of experts who use open source in their organizations and are worried about risk are focused on. So that could be a very useful contribution.
Good call.
SBOM.
Just on that, to expand a little bit more on that one, right? Alan, I think what you're highlighting, what Dan mentioned, falls into probably the development part type of organization. But I guess on the side, you could also argue that there could be third-party kind of like assessments, right? Particularly for the regulated consumers that don't have this development structure, and they wouldn't be able to implement that kind of tooling to analyze that as well, right? So I think that would be a side kind of like equivalent in a non-development organization. Does that make sense? Did I make sense?
You know, it totally does. I guess I had the idea, and sorry, I know Jacques had his hand up, so I apologize. They're jumping of saying, well, so there's your internal development team, right, and they're generating it, and they've got their vulnerability stuff. What we want to move to a world is when people give you software, or when you're using outside software, open source or proprietary, we want to encourage them SBOM. Why would you buy from someone who couldn't tell you what they had, or use something that you couldn't do that? But then what are you going to do with it to contribute to your risk management, right? So it's now software that you're using, so it's your responsibility. And so integrate, what are some of the existing security tools that you have that you can fit in? Does that make sense?
It does.
How do we nudge all your asset management tools, your vulnerability management tools, your CMDBs, your data lakes, all that stuff that you already have and you guys already pay a lot of money for? How can we say, we'd like you to also integrate SBOM data into it? Does that make sense? What I was going for.
As a tech-oriented company, I think it does make a lot of sense. As a hospital, I don't think that they would have such a thing, right? So I think that's what I'm saying, that in parallel, we should explore how would that look for those kind of, organizations or consumers. Yaks, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. That was a useful conversation. I have a slightly different angle that I wanted to raise. I feel like there's an open loop, which is between us and the auditors, or between SBOM folks and the auditors. Like, if auditors are starting to say, I want to hear about SBOMs, I want you to talk about SBOMs, then we need to make sure that we're giving the auditors the most up-to-date and accurate sort of information about how mature the SBOM space is, so that they can make sensible decisions about what compliance to push for in their audits. Because otherwise they're just going to be getting like the telephone game version of where the world is at. And that might cause a lot of harm, and that might cause a lot of blowback against SBOMs as a program. So I think that would be useful if we can find who, I guess the big four, and I, not having been audited for something like this myself before, I wouldn't know who else would be in the business.
Yeah. Just adding to that, I think that's one we should definitely put down is sort of an outreach, right? I think we discussed it at a previous meeting where we're trying to put together as a group some documentation to show end users what to do, and to sort of get together as members. But I think even within our charter, we'd actually suggested there was an outreach component. We should be talking to the auditors and trying to help inform or provide pointers to, as you're saying, Jacques, to look, this is the level of maturity, this is the state of the art. Don't necessarily, audit on the absolute bleeding edge that we're just still trying to figure out, but take a look at somewhere else. I think that's a great point. We should perhaps put sort of underline for next year to see how we can make those connections or strengthen those connections to provide the input. Yeah, that's a great one. One of the things, I guess it's more of an observation than something I'd like to suggest we look at next year is, I've heard from a number of members of the group that we're talking to a lot of other enterprises and end users and consumers, huge numbers of them, and trying to work in sort of a network and bring people back to this group. And we're having a lot of these conversations. Whilst not everyone is coming back to this group, we're still having those conversations externally. So I wonder if we're figuring out a way of trying to bring that conversation back to here, or at least report upon it, so that it's not, you don't have to be in this group to necessarily opine or provide input, but we can put together documentation or feedback to say, look, I just talked to 17 different car manufacturers about SBOMs and supply chain material. This is kind of what people were saying, and just bring it back to the group. Because I think we're missing that little element. Whilst there's only sort of 15, 20 of us in this group, we're actually talking to like a couple of hundred. There's a lot of information that I think we can share bi-directionally, and perhaps use it and bring it into this group. I want to make sure that, maybe I'm talking to someone, and maybe it would be useful for someone else in this group to know that there's a whole load of pharma groups that we're talking to that might be beneficial in general. Probe. You're on mute, mate. But we can all lip read.
When I raised my hand and lowered, it should know to unmute me. To your prior point, the education SIG is going to be creating material for a manager, auditor type persona. So if this group has materials like we want to educate people on SBOMs or how to incorporate open source in a regulated environment, this group can help jointly kind of create those materials, and the SIG can make that part of our pipeline as we blast it out through a couple different medium. So that's a future opportunity for this group to collaborate with over there in the education group.
Raise my own hand and lower it again. But you know what? I've started to already think about New Year's resolutions. And one of them is going to be, I personally need to figure out how to work together more closely with the other working groups. We've got together as a group the list of the working groups we're supposed to be going out and working with and reporting back upon. I'm just not earmarking enough time in the day to actually do that. That will be my New Year's resolution going forward. To contribute to your point, Crow, look, this is some educational material. It'd be great to input there. It doesn't all necessarily have to come back here, right? So that's one of my many New Year's resolutions I'm putting together. Grobe.
To that point, there is a group of people within the foundation that is working to kind of document everything that's going on, all the activity across the foundation. It's the Diagrammers Society. We have posted several different styles of diagram to help showcase different views of what the foundation is doing. We recently had a member make a mind map where he went through all of the existing documentation for every working group, SIG, and SIF. So that's that mind map file. So if you want to take a look at that, and if you were interested to start to improve your list of who you want to reach out to and what everybody's doing, that would be a good starting place. If you have an Apple device, we have that mind map file you can load up in a mind map program on Apple to kind of dive in, and it's all hyperlinked. Otherwise, if you don't have that, you can look at the ping file. But that might help inform activities in the future and kind of help show where we might add value or want to start to encourage collaboration.
Very cool. That is broad. That is, wow. That's an awesome bit of work. Very cool. Okay, any other thoughts about next year? Key focus areas? No. All right. I think we should probably come back to it every like quarter or something, because I think if I look at other groups that I'm in externally, we've probably put more action together on a piece of paper and tried to move things forward. We're going through things at a fair clip. We just need to get them up and running as proposals, perhaps. So maybe worthwhile coming back. All right. Next section is any notes from other working groups that anyone would like to share or bring back to the group. Any points of note? Lot of good thinking. Go for it, Crope.
The education SIG is in the final stages of formalizing our proposal for the governing board for funding around the education. So everyone is welcome. We'll be setting a formal call for comments for the best practices working group and the education SIG starting this week for 2 weeks, and then we'll push it up to the TAC for a 2-week comment. Everyone is welcome to participate on that. And we will probably do our little dog and pony show to the governing board sometime in January. The OSS CERT SIG, which may be of interest to some of you since many of you are consumers of open source. There is another funding proposal to create a dedicated open source security incident response team. That plan has already been shared with the TAC. I can point you to the issue there in a minute. That is open for 2-week comment. And then ideally, I don't think we'll squeeze it in before the end of the year, but we'd like to get that on probably the first governing board docket next year for funding for consideration. So those are 2 efforts that this group is welcome to participate and provide feedback on. And I'll drop links on issues that you can do that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Any other updates?
Can you drop those links in the minutes as well? Thank you.
I'll go. So I attended the LF Energy working group, Linux Foundation Energy Group, and gave a very small presentation about the end user work that we're doing in supply chain in general. Pretty well received. There's a couple of energy companies that reached out afterwards for a bit more detail on just the issue at hand. They've got a full book of work that is not at all supply chain related. So they're often doing that. But one of the things that did stick with me is in the conversations afterwards, they're looking at a very different area of supply chain security than we are, which probably makes sense. I have no deep insight into energy sector at all, really, but whereas we're looking at IT primarily, I guess we're looking at the vendor work, we're looking at the open source work that could be vendor or bespoke software. Clearly, they're looking at massive infrastructure that has software within it as well. Huge transformers, multi-million-dollar type thing, as opposed to something you'd get on a download over the internet. So different layer, slightly different challenges by the sound of it, but definitely connected. So a couple of interested parties from over there.
Yeah, how do you update software on that kind of thing? Like a button.
Carefully, I'd imagine. And with a very large wooden pole. I don't know. Yeah. Very good. So, okay, so open it up for any other business. Any other thoughts or input? Nope. Alrighty, so we'll close it there then. A fairly short meeting, but I think we did have the other one last week. I guess the next question is, do we want to meet again before the end of the year? Or, when should we set the next call? Everyone's heading into Christmas and parties and checking out and holidays and vacations. Any thoughts on next session? I'm for like
next
January.
year, realistically. Yeah, realistically.
Yeah. So even next year, when is that? January. The 5th of Jan?
I can do that.
Yep. All right. So I'll request that we cancel next week, because yeah, 22nd, there's limited chance of that, and go for the 5th. All right, very good. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your input. And I think let's have a great holiday season, and let's get those proposals going next year and work with the other working groups. Thanks a lot. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.